Christ is risen. Hi, everyone. My name is Dalia Fam. I was born and raised in the USA, and now I live here in Zambia, a small southern Africa country. And we've been living here, my husband and with my two wonderful kids, for almost 13 years. We felt and heard the calling in our lives from God to come here to Africa and to live here and to serve the poor and to just help the most vulnerable. But you know, the calling in my life happened way before I heard, this actual call to come to Africa. There was something always, even when I was younger, I felt God always calling me and giving me a desire to help the most vulnerable, to be a voice for those that have no voice. The only thing is, I just didn't know how to fulfill that call. How do I do it? What do I do? And instead, I just really struggled. And I tried to find my purpose maybe through studying human rights. So like I went to law school and I studied international human rights, and I was trying to figure out, how can I help people? How can I give people their rights? And then I couldn't find it in that. And I tried to, maybe make friends or find my value, find what I was looking for, find that calling in social life or in other things. And nothing was really fulfilling the call except for one thing. And that's when I found out who I really belonged to. In Song of Songs, chapter 6, verse 3, it says, "I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine, he who shepherds his sheep among the lilies." I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Who is my beloved? Of course, it's Christ. So when I found out that I belong to Christ, he belongs to me, and that is where I can really fulfill my calling. Knowing who I belong to, and knowing that I belong to someone even greater than myself, and when I stopped looking at just myself only, I was able to truly fulfill my calling. And how to find him, it says, he who shepherds his sheep among the lilies. Where do I find him? In the garden, shepherding his sheep. So to find him, I have to go and do his work, caring for his sheep with him. And the garden is many places. It could be our churches, our families, our communities, our neighborhoods, even here in Africa. There's a beautiful quote by St. Augustine that sums a lot of things up. It says, "To fall in love with God is the greatest romance. To seek him, the greatest adventure. To find him, the greatest human achievement." So I'll say it again. To fall in love with God is the greatest romance. To seek him, the greatest adventure. To find him, the greatest human achievement. It was when I fell in love with God that I was willing to follow him to the ends of the earth, even to come here to Africa. That was when I could really live out my calling. And it can be for you as well. When you really fall in love with God, you will hear his calling in your life. Maybe it's not to move to Africa, but maybe it's to reach out to a youth in your church group that's feeling left out, or it's to obey your parents, or to forgive someone that's really hurt you. There's a lot of things God is calling us to do, but we won't hear that call until we truly fall in love with him, till we realize that we belong to him and he belongs to us. And you don't have to wait until you grow up to be a missionary. You could fulfill that calling of a missionary today, even now. There's tons of things you could do in your homes, in your neighborhoods, in your sports teams, in your communities. You can create awareness about the environment. You could start a fundraiser. You can even, since we're on lockdown now, you can even be a missionary in social media. Write verses, encourage people. The world could really use that right now. Post about what you're learning today in Teens Day. Don't be afraid to show people who you are. That's a missionary, to be that light that the world needs. Don't be afraid to show people who you really are and who you belong to. When you fall in love with God, truly fall in love with him, then you can fulfill that call that God has for you and the call that God has for me. He is calling each and every one of us. And now you have to be courageous. We had to take a step of courage to come here to Africa, and it wasn't easy to leave our family, to leave our friends, to leave our comforts of what we know, to be even mocked or to be made fun of. And we all have to take that courageous step of faith and a courageous step to fulfill the calling that God has for me and God has for you. There's a really funny movie that my kids love. It's called Evan Almighty. And in the movie, there is a scene near the end where the journalist asks the actor, says, "Why do you think that you're called?" And then the guy answers, he says, "We're all called, but it's up to us, each one of us, to respond." So it's up to each one of us to respond. We're all called, and I pray with all my heart that you fall in love with God, seek Him, find Him, and be courageous to obey that calling. Thank you so very much.